and welcome to this week's YouTube video. Every 4 weeks I attempt a Procreate video where I try to transfer my oil painting skills to this medium to show that it is possible to do very painterly work in Procreate. For this video I thought I would attempt a master copy of John Singer Sargent's painting of Carolus Duran. If you want to have a go at this yourself, I will put a link to where you can download the reference photo. Why do a master copy? The aim is not to produce a near exact copy. Take this painting as far as you feel you need to. The purpose is to try to understand the artist's method and their process so that you can take the principles and put them into your own work. As we are trying to understand how to produce painterly artwork in Procreate, we need to look at how the masters did it. I am going to try to break this down for you so that if you want to have a go at this style of painting, you'll have an idea of how to do it. Before we start, let me tell you the brushes that you will need to do this painting. The wet acrylic and turpentine brush, Procreate, the blend stump wax brush and the small wet liner. These two brushes are found in the Pro Oil Painting set by Tip Top Brushes, which I purchased. Let's now have a look at the time-lapse video of the artwork. I call this the blocking stage. I used the wet acrylic brush to get a rough version of the painting. I chose a block colour for every area that I think represents the average value and average colour of what I'm looking at. I don't use this brush again. A very simple way to keep your drawing correct is to trace around your reference photo. Put in as much detail as you feel you need. Keep this on a separate layer which will sit at the top of your layers panel. Just toggle it on and off at various points during the process. This is an easy way to keep yourself correct. If you wish to practice your drawing, then I would advise doing it freehand. You can still trace around the photo and then compare your own drawing to the freehand version. You'll then be able to see how correct you have been. John Singer Sargent painted alla prima, which means he did his paintings in one go. So I would advise you to do this only on one layer. This will give you the benefit of wetter paint that can be more easily manipulated. Sargent would drag his colours into each other as well as his edges. Having multiple layers on Procreate makes it much harder to replicate this because the brush strokes behave a lot less like real paint. Keep it all on one layer as I have done. For the background, I've used the blend stump wax brush. This is a very wet brush that has a very painterly feel. The best way to use it is to turn the opacity down to between 50 to 70% and then be really rigorous with it. So for example, I can sort of stab at my tablet screen like this, which gives short heavy areas of colour. I can move my hand quickly side to side like this. This will give me more coverage, but it will still have a looser patchy feel to it. Or I can scribble randomly on the screen, just like this. This gives me more of a random application of colour. If I show you Sargent's painting, notice how the background had a lot of broken colour in it. If I turn the reference photo into black and white, you'll notice that the value is pretty much the same. To get that broken colour effect, Sargent has varied his temperatures. He has used warm colours and cool colours next to each other. Red is the warmest colour on the colour wheel, and as we move away from red, the colours get cooler. So red, orange and yellow are warm colours, blue is a cool colour, green and purple are transitionary colours because they can both be warm and cool. If I want to create this broken colour effect, how should I use my colour picker? There are two options. The first one is very simple and will only work if you have a warm colour as your base colour. Take orange as an example. The right side of the colour picker is warm, the left side is cool. All I need to do is move across to the left side and select the cooler orange hue. Remember though, if I move horizontally across, my value will change. It will get lighter. So you may well need to move down a bit too. The second option is a bit more complicated because it involves understanding colour theory. To explain simply, you can use the colour opposite or complementary colour. So if I had a blue background and I wanted to introduce a warm colour into it, I would use orange. Blue is cool, orange is warm. If I was using green as my background colour, I would introduce red. If green was cool, red would be warm, etc. Opposite colours neutralise each other when mixed together. Red mixed with green gives us brown, as does orange mixed with blue. You also have the advantage that complementary colours look amazing together, so it will always work. You'll find though that it's better to turn the opacity right down and only introduce very transparent brush strokes over the colour. That will be enough to give you your temperature change and broken colour effect. Look at the edges in the face area of Sargent's portrait. The biggest mistakes I see are hard edges where there should be soft. The only places where there is a hard edge is in these shadow transition areas here and here. Everywhere else it's a softer edge, so I would use my turpentine brush for all areas except where I need a bit more precision. And I want to drop a lot more paint in a concentrated area, like shadows of the eyes, or if I want to introduce a harder definite edge, then I would use my fine wet liner. I would use both on various transparencies depending upon the effect I want. If I want to drop a lot of paint in a concentrated area, I would use high opacity. If I want to feather my paint more and pull it across the face, I will turn the opacity down and then I can be much more rigorous with my strokes. You need to play about with it. For the majority of the portrait, I use the turpentine brush, but you need to be careful how you use this brush because it creates quite definite strokes with hardish edges, and if I don't soften these, I end up with something that looks a bit too scratchy. The best way to lay your strokes is a vertical action, but then to move back over it horizontally just like this, and this helps to soften the strokes. When selecting your colours, the best way to do this is by eye. Bear in mind, as you are working on a screen, your colours will be out. It is very difficult to colour match on digital art. Even if you were to try using the colour picker on the original photo, you will still be out because the brushes mix up the pixels and lose saturation due to their wetness. Also, the program itself will give you a colour shift, so my advice is judge the colour by eye. If you are looking at cooler tones, I find using cooler reds work pretty well on this side of the colour picker. I tend to use them quite transparently. I think you are much better off going too dark and then turning the transparency right down and laying multiple strokes over the top until you get the right temperature and value. For the lighter, warmer areas, I tend to move more into my oranges and select colours around this sort of area. Don't go too far over to the right for these lighter areas because it will be too saturated. I also turn my opacity up so that I am dropping more paint onto the canvas. This is how Sargent would have painted, because white is naturally very opaque and stiff as an oil colour, and it results in much thicker paint. I can, however, go much more saturated in my shadow areas. Look at how saturated that colour is around the shadow of the eyes, under his moustache and around his lips and hairline. Also notice how warm that colour is in the deep dark shadows. That's a saturated dark red, but look then how it switches to more of a cooler orange. You need to be continually aware of the temperature shifts, value changes and colour shifts to replicate what you are trying to paint accurately. The rest of the painting is done pretty loosely, with not a lot of detail. Look at that jacket. There is very little information in that. I have started off very broadly with minimum detail, and I'm building it up in value blocks, and then gradually adding detail. This makes it much easier and much quicker. Don't try to section it by working on small areas of detail. Work on the jacket as a whole, adding the detail gradually. Notice again how the jacket is largely made up of temperature shifts, with a few obvious value shifts in the creases. If I turn it into black and white again, you'll see how similar in value much of the jacket is. The brush I have used is the turpentine brush, with the fine wet liner for the details like the jacket edge. Again, you'll have to experiment with opacity, but the same principles apply. If I want to drop a lot of concentrated paint, I use high opacity, but with less brush strokes. If I want a more feathered approach, I use more brush strokes, but on a lower opacity. I have used exactly the same approach for the rest of the body and chose not to take it as far as the original. If I compare them side by side, you'll see areas of my painting is not as developed as Sargent's. Remember, the aim of the master copy is to understand Sargent's approach so that you can use it in your own work. But if you want to keep going with it, then do. There is no right or wrong. If we look at Sargent's painting again, notice how much that face draws you in. Sargent has done a very clever thing with his composition to direct our eyes around the artwork. There are two areas of really high value contrast here and here. These two areas here and here are not as pronounced in terms of value shift. This gives a viewing triangle. Our area of interest, which is the face, the eye then travels down to the left hand and then across over to the right before going up to the face. Sargent is telling us how he wants us to look at the painting. To summarise then, what are the principles we can take back into our own work if we want to do this style of painting in Procreate? Use wet brushes. Work on one layer if you can, but have your drawing on a separate layer to help keep you correct. Do a block-in and build up your detail gradually. Experiment with opacity. For areas that carry more white, use a higher opacity. Understand the different marks the brushes you are using make and how changing your hand action affects it. This will help you know when to use them. Pay attention to temperature shifts. Pay attention to edges. Judge your colour by eye and understand the limitations of Procreate in accurately replicating colour for this painting style. Work with complementary colours when necessary. I hope you have enjoyed today's video and found it useful. Please like and subscribe if you can, and check out my website Sarah Halliday Art, where you will find examples of my work and also details of online classes that I run. Thank you for watching and see you for the next one.